Entrepreneurially Thinking is a presentation of BioSTL and CET, Center for Emerging Technologies, with Rare Gem Productions, changing the way you view new ventures, including you on the pathway to success with your business in the St. Louis marketplace and beyond. Here's your hosts, Cheryl and Christy. Now let's get thinking entrepreneurially.
Welcome back to the Entrepreneurially Thinking podcast. Our goal is to embolden your entrepreneurial mindset and create pathways for business success in the St. Louis marketplace and beyond. I'm Christy-Maxfield.
And I'm Dr. Cheryl-Watkins-Moore. I lead our inclusion initiative for the St. Louis region through BioSTL. Hey, Christy girl.
How are you, dear?
I am doing well. I think we just started something.
We did just start something. We started our 8th season with our intro, and which means that we are almost at our 100th episode. And almost have 2 full years worth of content under our belt.
Oh my gosh. And thank you to all of you guys. You've grown us from 600 downloads and listens to over 23,000.
Yeah, easy.
Wow.
Yeah, and by your time you're listening, hopefully even more than that. So about 1,000 new plays and downloads a month, which I think is fantastic.
We're still growing.
But we also want to reach more folks. So we encourage you to share this with your friends, encourage them to subscribe. You can find us on your favorite platforms, whether that's iTunes, Spreaker, Facebook, LinkedIn. Visit our website at entrepreneurially-thinking.com, and we'd love for you to be part of the family. Part of the family is also our supporting founding sponsors, I should say, CET and BioSTL.
Yes.
So they make sure that we're able to continue to do this work, and we're looking to add additional sponsors to the fold. So if you'd like to be part of this family in that way, we would love to have you as well.
Yes.
So stay up to date with what they're doing. Visit their websites. And we're going to be talking with one of our friends today who actually went through the CET Square One program.
Yes.
You can always stay on top of what we're doing at CETSTL.org or at BioSTL.org and all the other newsletters and resources we have out there. So stay connected, folks.
Absolutely.
So
wherever you are,
I mentioned
we want to be.
We are talking to a friend today.
Yes, a friend who's got some amazing stories. So let me just start off by saying, first of all, physicians experience great opportunity as well as demand in their careers.
You would know, dear.
I would know that.
Doctor.
Lived it, been there, done that. They are required to work under pressure and make quick, accurate decisions. They must have excellent hand-eye coordination and practical skills.
I hope so.
Without alcohol, right? They are called upon to create and imagine solutions to problems that may not yet exist. And that's really true, because you are thinking all the time of how can you impact, right?
Yep.
Technology has augmented the capability of physicians and changed the medical field at an extraordinary pace. We can expect technology will continue to rapidly advance and improve treatment and the distribution of medical services. So when we come back, I am so excited. We will learn more about a man, an African-American man, who is building a digital platform that enables ear, nose, and throat doctors to deliver and enhance the patient-provider experience, health outcomes, and more importantly, practice profitability.
Woohoo!
Our good friend and colleague, Jeff Gamble, with Dynamic Surgical, will join us after the break. So if you guys haven't had this message out here yet or haven't heard about Jeff, you need to keep your listening ears on. So stay listening.
CET, the Center for Emerging Technologies, is a proud founding sponsor of this Entrepreneurially Thinking podcast. We want you to know all about the great things they are up to. CET is in the business of entrepreneur development, offering a variety of programming to meet the training and technical needs of early-stage entrepreneurs. These programs include the Square One Ignite and Bootcamp training program, Level Next, technical assistance, workshops, and other educational programming. To learn more about CET, the Center for Emerging Technologies, visit CETSTL.com. And for your renewed and continuing support, CET, we say thank you.
My name is Jeff Gamble. My company is Dynamic Surgical. Entrepreneurial thinking means being flexible enough to see what the world is really trying to tell you and acting on that. So not projecting what you want the world to be and what you see on the world, but actually listening and seeing and trying to figure out what it actually needs, wants, desires, and will use.
Jeff, we're so glad that you could join us today.
Thank you for having us.
We're thrilled that you're here as CTO and co-founder of Dynamic Surgical. We are thrilled to learn more about that company, but also...
What is a CTO, Christy?
A Chief Technology Officer.
I thought that's what it was.
It is.
Yes.
So we're going to talk more about that, and also just your personal journey on how it is you came to be here and doing this. I know a little just from the what you've shared with us in terms of having been in a military family, moved around a lot, had a lot of different experiences. So fill us in a little on what Jeff was doing before he made it to founding CTO and founder of Dynamic Surgical.
Yeah.
Yeah. All over the place. Is the short answer.
Went a lot of places, learned a lot of things.
Okay. My dad is an officer, or was an officer, I should say, in the U.S. Air Force.
Okay.
He did 30 years.
Wow.
But he was also a healthcare provider, so he is a dentist.
Aha.
Did 30 years as a dentist, active duty in the military.
Wow. So you guys have lived probably in some really interesting places, I would expect.
Yeah, well, I would say predominantly down south, so I don't know how interesting. No, I'm just kidding. I spent most of my childhood in the southeastern U.S., so Texas, Georgia, South Carolina, and then I did college in North Carolina.
Okay. And where did you go?
So I did Duke University. Go Blue Devils.
There you go.
I bleed blue.
And you did an interesting STEM undergraduate degree. What was that?
I did. Biomedical engineering was my major, and then I minored in neuroscience.
Wow.
Just a 1-2 punch.
It was kind of random. I mean, it was an elective my junior year.
An elective?
It was an elective. So
when you're in biomedical engineering,
I guess neuroscience just becomes an elective.
It was an elective.
Okay.
No. I was going to take an easy class because everybody told me
underwater basket weaving.
Geology was what I was actually looking at. But
I love me some rocks.
Yeah,
I was actually going to take a rocks and jocks class because I needed a break.
Yeah,
of course you did.
And I talked to my dad, and I was like, "Look, I'm really interested in this neuroscience class. I think I think it's something I would love. But I'm tired, man.
Yeah.
Like I need some time to myself."
Thermodynamics was like wearing on you.
There was a lot
bit.
wearing on me. Diffusion and
right.
Yeah. And my dad, his short response was, "Don't be shiftless." And
I love that.
Go do
what
not
interests
squander
you. Your time, young man.
I mean, really. I mean,
you're at Duke. You're at Duke University. I don't think you can be shiftless at Duke.
Well, exactly.
Right?
No, but for him, it was like, look, it's probably going to be difficult, but he's like, I know you, and if you enjoy something, you'll figure it out.
Oh,
so just because it's difficult, don't let that deter you from taking it. Best advice I could have gotten, because that actually took me. I did that minor. I went to grad school and concentrated in neural engineering.
Okay.
Right, and so that's really what brought me to WashU in the first place.
And you're at WashU doing what?
So I did my PhD in biomedical engineering at WashU.
Hello,
in St. Louis.
all of my children listening out there, especially my 16-year-old son, Tyler.
Who I met recently.
Yes.
Awesome young man who's going to kill it. He is going
we
to kill
have
it.
a
thank
great
God. That's
example.
a third-party validation that you can back off on this boy.
Leave him alone.
That's probably what he's saying. Leave me alone.
He had more of his life figured out than I have today. So
I'm glad, because he's monosyllabic with me. He actually had syllables for you, so that's great.
I had all the stories.
Awesome.
Well, but that's great. So you have a great background. So how did you started thinking about this once you got to WashU? Were you thinking about entrepreneurship or?
Not at all, actually.
Really?
So I would say in undergrad, the startup scene as we know it today hadn't really popped off yet.
Nope.
I think it was much more like if you were in California or you were in New York, you knew about those scenes.
Yeah.
But, in North Carolina, no one was really talking about startups like that. I was there at Duke from 2007 to 2011.
Okay.
So it was kind of early in this what we call startups today.
Yeah.
I got to WashU at a really interesting time where, WashU is a very traditional,
yes,
some may say conservative university. And
that's Washington University in St. Louis for everybody out there.
You know, all my college friends were like, "Oh, how's Seattle?" Like,
right.
And I'm like, "Have I ever mentioned in Seattle ever?" But yeah, in St. Louis. And I think when I first started in grad school, they were having a bit of an awakening where they were realizing that they were falling behind, frankly.
And that there's not going to be an academic position for everybody in a PhD program was sort of the vibe when I came in, you know, in 2015 when I started working within this ecosystem and having more interaction with WashU and stuff. There was this realization that like we may be behind, but we also have to open up people's career pathway thinking because there was just not enough academic positions, even if everybody wanted one.
And we saw that in engineering in particular. So biomedical engineering at WashU was traditionally a basic science department. So all the research was much more focused on discovering why things happen as opposed to applications. And so as I would say my first 2 years, as I was talking to older classmates who were in their 5th and 6th year, and I was watching them struggle to find jobs. That was terrifying.
No doubt.
Was that the clue for you?
Oh, I mean, if you could call it a clue, like it's more like the loudspeaker that was
blinking
like,
sign.
Bong, bong,
figure out your life, man.
Right, exactly.
So I had a good friend of mine, Manu Steven, who has a startup here in St. Louis. Who he was working on another startup at that time. And we were out just grabbing beers, and he was like, "Hey, man, I think you'd be great at this stuff. You have the personality for it. You just got to find something to work on." You know? And so I think there were 2 opportunities that popped up. It was my 2nd or 3rd year. One was I had a professor who came to me and was like, "Hey, you know, we're working on a particular medical device. Do you want to work part-time a few hours a week?" I said, "Okay, sure. You know, whatever."
Yeah,
I didn't
no
really
harm, no foul.
know what to expect. Shout out to Dr. Moran and DME. So I spent about 1.5 years working part-time at Neurolutions. So biogenerator company, and now they're an Ascension company as well. I learned so much during that period of time. You know, I got to do a little bit of the engineering, but then I also had a window into the business side. Because I was working very closely with their director of engineering, who was my PhD classmate. But he was 20 years older than me. So he had a ton of industry experience, but was doing his PhD much later in life. And he was the one that kind of pulled me into that opportunity.
That's great.
So Rob Coker, great guy. And so the other opportunity was I went and did a healthcare hackathon. I think it was the first one that WashU had ever put on. So this must have been 2013, 2014, something like that.
I think I was a judge at that one.
You may have been. And I mean, it was an awesome event. I had a lot of fun. And kind of out of that came an idea that became my first startup company, SnapPeas, which was, you know, a cross between healthcare and the grocery space. And that's, you know, when I originally met Christy, you know, through the Square One program, was working on that startup. And at that time, I had been doing it for maybe about 1.5 years. Completely learning as I went as just the CEO. So, you know, I was a student during the day. I was working at Neurolutions. I was doing graduate consulting projects for startups, and I was working on that. So I had a lot going on at that time.
Well, that's so funny when young companies, everybody gives themselves a title, and I laugh. I'm like, CEO, what the hell does that mean? You mean you're doing everything? Right?
Really? No, I mean, really, I was doing everything. I was in meetings. I had a meeting with the chief marketing officer of Schnucks. And had to pitch to him what we were working on. And, I mean, you want to talk about being terrified? me, the engineer, just like... I'm
going to revolutionize Schnucks.
I'm going to change grocery.
With SnapPeas.
And it was funny, but it was a great experience because he basically was like, I would never buy this. But... you have the nugget of something that could be a great idea. So go hit the drawing board and come back to me.
Well, that's good feedback.
You know,
and an opportunity to come back.
Oh, totally. Great. And it was around that time I did Square One, and they basically just torpedoed my idea. But
so as we have told folks, we are both cheerleaders and crushers of hopes and dreams, sometimes in the same breath, right? But we let the process reveal to Jeff.
Exactly. This was not something that you want to do.
That maybe the nugget wasn't as big as we wanted it to be.
Big shout out to Q.
Yes. Quentin Ortega is our track leader for IT and has done a lot of startups himself. And, Nugget, Boulder.
But that's what we want to happen, right?
Pebble. It might have just not been the right size. But you got some other stuff out of the Square One program, too.
No, totally. I got into the Square One program, and one of my lab mates at the time, so he was a resident ENT physician who was doing his research rotation in my thesis lab.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And happened to be in Square One.
And yeah, so he heard about Square One through me and was like, oh, I got to put in an application real quick. And so it was kind of through our experience getting to know each other in lab and then through Square One getting to know each other. We ended up, once I completely throttled SnapPeas, I was like,
throttled itself.
The process revealed.
The process revealed. But, Donish and I decided that, hey, man, we like each other. We have a good rapport with each other. We are yin and yang. We have two very different personalities, like very different, but it works for us. It works for us, and I think we balance each other out, and we tend to meet each other in the middle, which is where the beauty really happens.
Absolutely.
Right, and so it was that's where we decided, hey, man, let's co-found Dynamic Surgical and let's get the show on the road.
Well, this is I love it. The Square One program. Chris, if you guys don't know this, Christy and I work hand in hand with our inclusion
raising awareness,
initiative and
people
CT.
trained.
Right. And the whole focus with her program is getting those early stage emerging entrepreneurs with maybe an idea, maybe a business plan, could be. But the three things we want you to do is either persevere because it's a good plan.
Yep.
Pivot if it's not so good, or like it will happen to you. The process revealed itself to say, "This is dead. This is dead on arrival."
So and maybe there's a fourth P in addition to perish. There's partnership, right?
Yes.
You guys aren't the first folks, or hopefully the last, who've gone through the program and seen that there's opportunity to work together and let one of the ideas lead, or frankly, do the pivot and pursue the pivot together.
I love it. Yeah.
So when we come back, we're going to talk more. Yeah, I think we've got a fourth P.
Yeah.
When we come back, we're going to talk more about that partnership and Dynamic Surgical.
BioSTL is a proud founding sponsor of this Entrepreneurially Thinking podcast, and we want you to know all about the great things they are up to. BioSTL Fundamentals is an entrepreneur development program designed to support early would-be entrepreneurs in the life sciences in St. Louis. The program provides a one-on-one customized business learning experience for each participant. You can learn more about BioSTL Fundamentals by visiting biostl.org. And for your renewed and continuing support, BioSTL, we say thank you.
I'm Teresa Hines, a product designer here in St. Louis. I work at Monsanto. I would say entrepreneurially thinking to me means really thinking outside of the box. Like there's always an obvious answer for everything, but when you take the time to push yourselves, whether that is in a different environment with different people or taking the time to really think through a solution is when you find the best answers.
So you and Donish got together. And frankly, even when Donish was in the class, we weren't even really sure about his technology. Everybody wanted his technology to work. He was talking about taking a flexible tube that once inserted could then become rigid so that device implements could be used by the surgeon. And we were all like, damn, that would be great if you could do that. Damn.
Because we were like, that's a material science
We were like,
feat.
physics. Physics seems to be going on here, right? That kind of thing.
Changing material.
What, like, you obviously have overcome certain hurdles
and
or
Jeff,
pivoted away.
The engineer.
Right.
Well, that was...
And that's why we were like, oh, well, Jeff thinks it'll work. All that.
I mean, so I would say that is... I mean, that's why I would follow Donish into the middle of the ocean. Wow. In that he's someone that always finds a way. Like, if he believes in something, he will find a way to make it happen. And I've admired it because I don't have that personality.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit more cautious.
I'm more like you.
You know,
I've worked with the Donishes of the world, too.
Yeah,
I mean, I've had a partner like that where I'm like, oh, damn. I don't know if that's going to work.
I don't know if this can work.
I'm going to build the lifeboat, though.
But, no, I mean... I wouldn't say I built the lifeboat.
Well, you're always doing something in the background to be like, I believe you, and here's my risk mitigation strategy.
No,
right?
totally. And that's why he brought me on board, right? Was he was like, I have this dream and vision, but I need someone who can actually be grounded and think through it and, get us there.
Right.
So yeah, when I came on board, it started out as kind of a material science physics problem. So I hadn't touched physics and electrical engineering in God knows how many years. And so when we started out, so I guess to back out, the original idea with dynamic surgical was, physicians were having a hard time doing procedures in the office. So the thing with ENT, so ear, nose, throat, is the space we work in. When they're doing procedures in the office setting, the patients are awake, right? And so you have to be flexible enough to maneuver to whatever location you're going to be doing tissue manipulation, but then the tool needs to be rigid enough to actually transmit force to manipulate tissue.
And these are people going in those orifices. So ear, nose,
throat.
and throat.
Right.
So
and
all natural
tissues.
While you're awake.
Yeah.
But that's what's exciting about ear, nose, throat, right? Is that it's actually the only specialty that has 3 natural orifices, and you have access to 4 out of 5 of the core senses. So it's a really cool area to play in.
Sure.
But they have very unique problems.
Like your brain up in there if you penetrate.
You don't want to puncture into the brain is one thing.
Keep your sinuses intact. All sorts of things.
And then there's a ton of economic pressures going on as well.
Sure.
So there's this huge movement from the operating room hospital setting to the office setting to try to mitigate those economic pressures.
Right.
But it has created a whole other swath of issues. We were just interviewing a couple ENTs a couple weeks ago, and one of them on the phone verbatim just said, yeah, doing procedures in the office is a crap show. And he didn't say crap, but
we know what he said.
and we just laughed. But it was a gem to hear somebody say that because
just
they're like
real talk.
They're like, man, we don't know what we're doing, but we have to because that's the only way to stay profitable.
Right.
So we started off, working on head and neck cancer. You wanted to do head and neck cancer biopsies.
Okay.
Patients had a significant delay between knowing that they needed a biopsy and getting the biopsy because they had to go into the operating room and go under general anesthesia. Well, the operating room wait times for doctors is fairly backed up these days.
You think? Yeah.
So, you were on like a 3-month waiting list just to get a biopsy.
Wow.
Right? And so we came up with this technology where they could adapt the flexible endoscopes that they already had. And so for the listeners out there that don't know what an endoscope is, it's a long, flimsy tube that has a camera at the end of it. So the doctors use that to visualize inside the body while the patient is typically awake. And so we said, well, why can't we just adapt that tool for them to be able to do those procedures while the patient's awake? You can do it quickly. You can send it out to get the biopsy done, to get the report done. You're good.
Right.
Well, we didn't take a deep enough look, I think, into the business end of it. And healthcare, frankly, is driven by reimbursements.
Sure. Know who your payer is.
Know who's paying. And so it's hard to talk about healthcare as a free market, but that's a whole other conversation that could go on for a couple hours. But the payer and the user and the person that's experiencing are all different stakeholders.
Yep.
Right.
So you're trying to meet all those the demands of all those stakeholders. Well, what we found out was that those biopsies today, there's just not enough volume for the doctors to give a crap. And so they were like, cancer is a very feel-good story, but am I really going to make money doing this? And I was like, damn, okay.
There's a need, but like you said,
there's a need, but the volume wasn't high enough. And so we had gone down the path of developing this technology. So by that time, we had hired a director of engineering, Ilker Tune, who's been amazing for us.
Wow.
He came over from Stereotaxis. Was
another startup
in St. Louis. So he was an engineer there, principal scientist for 15, 20 years, who had robotics expertise.
Yes.
And so he had taken us a really far way along that development path. And we were like, but crap, this particular application may not work for us.
Right.
What do we do? So Danish and I had to take a step back. We had to look at, we knew we didn't want to leave ENT. We knew that the technology we were developing still had applicability in that space and wide applicability. But the question was, do we find a specific use case, or do we just kind of widen it out as a platform tool?
Right.
And kind of start off from there. So we decided to go down the path of, specific clinical application. That's common in med device.
Sure.
St. Louis in particular.
We like our use cases.
Like your use cases. And so we said, all right, we can figure this out. And so come to find out, so Danish's dad had some cardiac issues when he and I were just getting to know each other. Well, those cardiac issues where he was in and out of the ER in the hospital for over a 4-month period of time, they were vastly driven by his sleep apnea. Undiagnosed sleep apnea that he'd probably had for 30, 40 years, right? My dad has sleep apnea and uses a CPAP.
So does my dad.
Right?
Yep.
And my mom complains about that CPAP, day in and day out. She calls him Darth Vader.
With love in her heart.
with love in her heart. But, so we realized, like, okay, here's this area that we really care about. And we realized that there aren't as many treatment options out there as there really should be.
Right.
Considering that, the economic impact it's having, the impact that it's having on people's day-to-day lives.
And the population of people that are actually using this technology is really large.
It's large.
Yes.
You have millions and millions of people who are on CPAP.
Yes.
And so... And they all hate it. Right. And so I was like, so no one has thought of an alternative, right?
Right.
It's like the wheelchair with the tennis balls.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, when we were looking at alternative and in particular surgical alternatives, those were fairly limited. And one of the main problems was that, to do surgeries today for sleep apnea, you had to put patients under general anesthesia. But sleep apnea patients are very high risk under general anesthesia.
Right.
Their risk of going to the ICU, triples when they go under. So there was this, catch-22, which we saw as an opportunity, right? So what if you could perform some of these surgical procedures in an office setting since they're already doing surgeries in the office?
Yeah.
So what we realized was one type of surgical intervention that people had tried was ablation therapy. So using radio frequency or microwave frequency ablation, so thermal energy, to shrink the size of the tissue in the airway so that the patients, when they're sleeping, their airway wouldn't collapse anymore.
Got it.
Right? And so the technology that we had developed actually worked very well for that use case. You needed to navigate to the airway, so think of like the pharynx or the base of the tongue area, which is usually the number one culprit for sleep apnea.
Right.
So they need to navigate there transnasally, and they need to perform the ablation therapy by penetrating the tissue with a needle to apply the energy deep within the tissue.
Okay.
Right. So we're like, oh crap, our technology can do this.
We can do it.
There's volume here.
And, volume on top of volume.
Right.
Right. And so we went very far with that. We were focused on that for a good 6 to 8 months. We are now sleep apnea experts.
Yeah. Wow.
We got into some deep conversations with some really good medical device venture capital firms. And it was actually that process of talking to VC firms where we had to take a deeper dive that I think we hadn't even thought of taking.
Okay.
And then we realized, I think we're overlooking some key components here, both in the ENT market in terms of what they're dealing with on a day-to-day to even adopt this type of tool.
Wow.
So tool adoption, as you know, that's its own...
solving the problem and getting people to use the solution are two different things.
Getting them to use it is a whole other ball game. And so we had a VC firm that was like, well, how are you guys going to actually get them to adopt this? Right.
And
so physicians are very timid about adopting new technology, new techniques, especially if something is tried and true. Then you got to get them to switch.
Definitely. And so, as we took a deeper dive, we noticed two things, I think. So sleep apnea in general, so to even get the approval from your insurance company to get a surgical intervention for your sleep apnea, it's a very long process.
Yeah.
So there are about 6 different doctor visits you have to go through before
Sleep
you can
study.
get approved that. Yep.
My dad just went through all of them, so I am quite familiar with it. Yes.
So you have to do 3 individual visits where they titrate the actual pressure on your CPAP.
Yep.
And then they have to do 3 other visits where they try different mask sizes. And through all those visits, they have to show that that did not work for you. That's the only way your insurance company is going to pay for you to get a surgical intervention.
So does that mean you're on the cusp of another pivot?
Well, we've already started a pivot.
Wow.
due to that information. And that information came out of, I was actually doing customer discovery. I was sitting with a doctor.
Love customer discovery.
I was in an ENT practice.
To somebody?
Yes, talking to somebody. Right?
Open-ended questions, not leading them with...
Exactly.
Yes,
Marketing,
all of that.
a little bit of market research, right?
I was talking to a medical assistant in an ENT practice. So he was busy doing a procedure. I was talking to his assistant, and she's the one that actually told me that, oh, yeah, well, we can't even get paid unless they do X, Y, Z. And I was like, oh, my God. Like, this is going to be a problem.
Hurdle. That's a huge hurdle.
And so they don't even manage the sleep studies. They used to manage them, but it became an administrative burden for them because patients were constantly calling in and saying, oh, well, it's uncomfortable. What do I need to do?
Yeah.
They're busy with all types of other crap in the ENT office. And so we said, okay, that's going to be a problem. On top of it, I think there was a wider problem in ENT that we were overlooking in terms of their workflow, in terms of how it was very disjoint, and they were using and paying for all these different software solutions and all these different tools, medical devices to use there at the point of care when they're doing these surgical procedures, but none of those tools were really catered to the fact that they're doing high volume number of procedures in the office with awake patients. And in ENT, they have to manage the entire spectrum of the patient experience. From the time they come through the door saying, I have a problem, to the time where they walk away saying, I feel better.
Right.
That's unique. You know, primary care doctors don't really have to do that. And in a lot of medical specialties don't have the same level of diversity in the type of conditions that they're looking at.
So it sounds like you guys have, went down one road. You, in talking to your customer, understanding a little bit more their pain points, their needs, you've pivoted, and you are working towards now another solution, right? And how's that solution being accepted in the marketplace?
So as we talk to the ENTs today, they're excited about it because we're finally truly speaking their language
and solving the problem that needs to be solved.
And solving the problem. So one problem, we were in a meeting actually a couple weeks ago, and one ENT was telling us that the high deductibles has actually changed their whole practice. So ENT is very reliant on elective surgery. Well, the high deductibles that most patients are coming in with today means that they don't want to, they can't pay.
Right.
I can't meet my deductible, so I don't want this surgery.
Right.
So now patient education is becoming a much more critical component of their practice, but they don't necessarily have the tools or the time
So are you
to
guys
do that.
looking at that as another opportunity?
So we're looking at as a wider opportunity that's still part of the device offerings that we're putting in their office. So we realize that, robotic surgery in an office setting still has a ton of merit, but it actually sits in the context of the encounter workflow.
Yep. And all of this while raising money.
Right.
While bringing on additional
money.
employees. Because the thing, when we talk about growing companies, right, we need capital, we need talent. And we need that talent to be nimble enough to be able to make all of these pivots and seize these new opportunities and learn from the customer discovery that you're doing.
And doing it in an environment that's heavily regulated. So from an FDA environment, being compliant with that. So Jeff and his partner are building a true STEM-focused medical device type of technology and company that is not like you can do this in a year. So.
No. I mean, we've now moved towards the connected device space, where you have medical devices that are connected to software platforms in the office, as a way of really integrating those devices into their workflow in a meaningful way. And parts of it are heavily regulated. Parts of it are not regulated at all.
But you're figuring it out as you go.
We're figuring it out as we go because that's what you have to do.
Absolutely.
And which is why you need the runway, right?
Yes.
Oh, so I could talk to you all day about runway.
I'm sure we could. But, we are coming to the end of our time together.
Oh, sure.
But just like reflecting on this experience, you had the academic credentials to do whatever you wanted, and your experiences have led you on this entrepreneurial pathway. What are some of the things that you've either learned about yourself or about, just through this process that you would share with others?
Yeah, I would say that I discovered that I was flexible and nimble in a way that I didn't know that I was.
Especially having an engineering background. Many of you guys are very rigid.
Yes, that's a nice way of putting it.
Some might say conservative.
Yeah, some might say conservative.
Having worked and led engineering teams where you're going, I don't need you talking to a customer. You just sit there and do not say anything.
No, and on that note, I've learned that having the engineer at a startup, having the engineers interface with the customers, if you don't have them do that, it'll sink your ship.
Absolutely, it's critical.
It'll sink your ship. So we've now been going double time in making sure that our engineers have some sort of contact with the customers to really contextualize what they're working on. Because it's hard when you're this early. And then I would say the last piece was just leading people.
Hugely challenging.
I had never been asked really to lead a group of people before, and so that's been a learning experience for me. Everyone has their own wants, needs, desires, and you're trying to line those up with the priorities of the company,
right?
While also being, while also keeping them in mind,
right?
And so that I think I have more room to grow, but at the same time, I've had to figure it out, and I think we're going to win.
You're gaining some valuable skills that can be transferable to any, with this business, which we know is going to be extremely successful because you guys are looking at the right things. You're talking to people, and even you're pivoting at the right time. So, well,
thank you.
And what you guys don't know is Jeff is not only a business guy; he's getting married in less than what?
Well, less than 6 weeks from this conversation.
Wow.
So maybe by the time this airs,
balancing that, will
also be.
So we always say how not just balancing your professional life, but having balance in life and being able to, have relationships outside of what you're doing.
Yes. And I think your significant other has to be fully bought into what you're working on.
Amen to that. We talk about them as your first investor in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yes. She has actually brought investors so some of our investors are her colleagues.
Oh, wow.
So she is like all in on this.
That's
so she's
fabulous.
been great.
That is great. So what's the legacy you want to leave behind? I mean, you're young, you are out there. What is the thing that what Christy talked about? You've learned a lot. What is it that you want to leave behind?
So I want to make a dent on the world. When I was in my PhD, I think I got a little lost because I wasn't able to always see the impact that my work was having. And so that's really what brought me to Startup World, was that I could have a direct impact on the world. For me, I am big on, one, I'm a big fan of St. Louis as a whole. So I'm big on being a part of growing this into the city that I know it can be. It has a long way to go.
Yeah.
I'm really big on minority involvement. So I try to see myself as an example.
Yep.
So I do a lot of work with kids in high school and middle school, and
giving back.
That's been wonderful for me. So really, I think assuming that we're able to make this a big win, and I would love, my big dream is to start a venture capital firm here in St. Louis that is particularly focused in investing in underrepresented populations.
Yep.
It was one of the things that motivated me to get into startups. Was I was looking at all the VC firms here in St. Louis, and I didn't see anyone that looked like me.
Yep.
And so I said,
on that.
Yeah, and so I know some people are working on that. So we'll have to talk.
Absolutely.
But it was something that it lit a fire under me because I looked at some of the people, and not to say that they weren't intelligent people, but I said, if they can do that, I can do that.
Exactly.
Why can't I be there?
Absolutely.
And I want to be that example for others as well.
Well, Jeff, you are an amazing example of the talent, just your background, your spirit, all of that. And I thank you for giving back to our communities here in the St. Louis market. Our kids need to see that. Our adults need to see that. Yeah. So thank you. And thank Christy for making you pivot on the process.
The process reveal.
The process reveal.
No, well, thank you both for the impact that you both have had an impact on my process over the last couple of years. And I look forward to the further impact we'll probably have in each other's lives.
You're going to be coming back. We're going to be talking to you sometime in the future.
We're going to be trying to get some venture capital out of him at some point.
Okay, you know where we always go.
Money talks.
Money talks. Awesome. Well, thank you for carving out time to be with us. It's been a delight.
Thank you for having me. This has been a great experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Changing the way you view new ventures. Igniting your thinking about entrepreneurship. It's Entrepreneurially Thinking. Get connected and discover more. Visit our website for show notes, resources, information about our guests, upcoming events, and of course, all your favorite episodes. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them for us in the comment sections, and be sure to leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The best way to show love is to share. Let everybody know that you're thinking entrepreneurially. So visit our website, entrepreneurially-thinking.com. #ETHINKSTL. Entrepreneurially Thinking is another positive production of Rare Gem Productions. Thanks for listening.